Welcome to webdevelopment-school.com. My name is Ton van der Poel, and today we're going to talk about CSS and the difference between classes and IDs. We're going to make a little example of some HTML with some headings, and we're going to style it a bit with CSS, and then I'm going to show you what an ID exactly is and how you can use it. Let me just start off by opening my editor, and I'm going to type in a little bit of HTML here. I'm gonna make a heading, 3 headings. Let me save that as example.html. Open the browser. Example. Okay, here's the output of the 3 headings. I'm gonna separate these two just like this. These headings are HTML tags, as you know by now. We can style these headings with CSS, and therefore I have to introduce a new tag, style, and between this open and close tag we can define some CSS here. But first I need to tell the tag it's containing CSS. You can forget about this. Most important is that you put it between a style open and a style close tag. In CSS we got some classes and IDs. Let me first start off about classes. You've read that classes can be used multiple times. Say we want these headings to be orange. What I did here is I gave all the h1 elements the class orange heading. And note that this is a class name you can make up for yourself, but it's always valuable and handy to use logic relevant class names, so you can always figure out by the name what it is. So h1 class orange heading will mean something like, alright, that CSS class is gonna give it a orange color. Let me just do that by typing in orange heading, color orange. Okay, what do we got here? We got a new attribute class with an attribute value orange heading, which is the class name, and each of these 3 headings have the same class orange heading. This here is CSS. Well, actually these 3 lines are CSS. First we use a dot to indicate that this is a class, then the class name, and then between these 2 guys we can type in all kinds of CSS styling. Say I want another font like Verdana or something. Let's check out how this results. We can see that all of the 3 headings are now orange and in the font family Verdana. Let me just create some headings. What's pretty nifty of this CSS is that all of the style is on one place. So if someone goes up to you and says, hey dude, listen up, these orange headings are weird and they look like shit, you can simply edit it in one place. Say somebody says, okay, let's make this red. You only have to change the CSS to red and all of the headings will be red. This is very handy, and when you got a complicated website with all kinds of elements, pictures, divs, headings, videos and all of that, it's very handy to centralize the CSS and have everything in one place actually. Well, we can see here that orange heading is a bit of a weird name since it's coloring the headings red, so I'll change it back to orange. I want to show you something about an ID, and an ID is nothing more or less than an exception to say a class name, because let's face an example that all of these h1 elements got to be orange, but one of them has got to be blue. Well, since the orange heading is used multiple times, all of those, let's see how many is it, like 8 headings are orange, and I want to create one that's blue, but it also has to be in the font face of Verdana. We can give that an exception with creating an ID. Say I give this ID the name blue heading. With this ID we can create an exception in CSS, and the class name is indicated by a dot, so dot orange heading stands for class name orange heading with these CSS properties color and font family Verdana, but the ID is indicated by a hashtag. So we're gonna type here ID and then blue heading, because that's the ID name we just gave it, that's the attribute value right here, and we say alright, let's make this one blue. Now you see you can make an exception with an ID, so all of it is orange but only one of them is blue, and this can be pretty this can come in very handy when you got all kinds of elements who has to be all the same, but there's just one element who's got one little different thing. Well, there's an ID coming in very handy. It's also important to know that an ID is weighs more than a class name. So if a class name says, okay, this has got to be red, and an ID says this has got to be black, it's definitely going black, because the ID has more priority than a class name. I'm gonna leave it to this. This is a short introduction about CSS and ID names. You can read further on this subject on our website, webdevelopment-school.com. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and I hope to see you at the website.